Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Telling Stories and Illustrating Concepts with Storyboards. I'm your host, Richard Byrne, and this webinar is being brought to you in part by me and Storyboard that was a sponsor of the webinar. I do have a representative of Storyboard that on the webinar with me today. His name is Josh, and he'll be joining in when I cue him in, or whenever there's a question that pops up that I don't have the answer to. It happens sometimes that I don't have the answer. So if this is your, oh, sorry. If this is your first time joining me for a webinar, and I can see that some people joining us today, have been on a couple of webinars with me in the past, so welcome back. But if this is your first time joining us, a couple of logistical things to be aware of. Number one, thanks, Sharon. Awesome. Sharon's a first timer. Awesome. So some logistical things to be aware of. There is a chat function built into GoToTraining. You can use that at any point during the webinar today to ask me any question you like. Anything about storyboards, storyboard that, or just how's the weather, or Richard, why did your picture just fall down? Or why don't you have drywall behind you? Because it's a brand new office and I haven't gotten drywall installed yet. So that's one of the things you can do with the chat function. That chat function will also allow you to weigh in with a comment. If it's not a question, just weigh in with a little comment. Everything you see on my screen for the next hour is being recorded. So if there's something that goes by too quickly and you want to watch it again later, don't worry, you'll be able to get the recording and watch it again. And likewise, if something's going by too quickly in the live webinar, just say, hey, Richard, do that again, please, or show me that again. And I'd be more than happy to do that. One of the best things about being here for the live webinar is that you get to influence the pace of the webinar itself. All right. I think I've covered all the logistics. I'm just checking my notes over here, and I think I've covered all the logistics of the webinar itself. So a little background on me. My background in education is mostly in social studies. I also worked in special education for a few years, but mostly as a social studies teacher. And I started using storyboards before there was even Storyboard that. This is years ago. I got into using storyboards and the idea of having students diagram stories when I actually taught ninth grade language arts. I taught that for 1 year. It was my first teaching job, actually. It was ninth grade language arts. And I was working with a group of students who we would classify as emerging readers. And I discovered that I could get them to really dive into some text and some stories if I gave them the flexibility to diagram and show me their understanding of the story in a way that worked for them. And that's kind of how I got into storyboards. And so meeting up with Storyboard, that probably back in 2011. If Aaron was here on the webinar, he would tell me exactly what year it was. I think it was 2011. It might have been 2010. It was just a natural fit. So that's how I come about using storyboards and storyboard that in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the webcam right now, just because what happens on my screen is far more important than what happens here in my face. You'll hear my voice, but you won't see my face anymore starting now. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and start here. And I want to start with a few questions. And you can weigh in the GoToTraining chat if you'd like to on these questions. But first of all, think about if you've ever had a student say, I'm not creative, or I'm not an artist, or I'm not good at drawing, or I don't know. One of my most common questions is, I don't know what to write about. That writer's block piece. If you've ever had a student say something like that to you, Uh, just say yes in the chat. If you've ever heard that from a student. I know I certainly have, many times. Yeah, Sharon, thank you. Uh, Kim says, "Oh yes, multiple times." We probably hear it multiple times. Particularly if you teach creative writing or any kind of writing class or language arts, you've probably heard that a lot, right? Uh, and I've heard it a lot too. And that's one of the reasons why I like storyboards in general is that they, yeah, seventh graders don't want to try it sometimes. Yeah, I think a lot of times it's because they think by the time they're in seventh grade, or by the time they're in high school, they've kind of pegged themselves as I'm not creative, I'm not an artist, or I'm not this or that. Uh, and a tool like Storyboard that and storyboards in general often open up a whole new realm for me of thinking outside of that niche, thinking outside. Uh, you know, on a similar note, you've had that student who says, I hate diagramming or I hate outlining. I was that kid. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who's kind of coaching me on how to write a book. I'm working on writing a book. And he was coaching me on outlining because I used to hate outlining, and I still do kind of. I don't say I hate it, but it's not my most favorite thing to do anymore. But he reminded me, hey, he said to me basically, hey, dummy. He used a stronger word than that. You use storyboards all the time. Why don't you do it for that? I'm like, oh, duh, yeah. And this one happens to me a lot, and probably happens to some of you as well. You look at someone's graphic organizers, and you wish yours were that cool. You look through Teachers Pay Teachers, or you look through Pinterest, and you wish, oh man, I wish I could make something that looked as nice as that. As I say on the slide here, I do that anytime I look at Tony Vincent's work. Tony Vincent's a friend of mine, makes beautiful designs. And every time I look at him, I wish I'm like, why didn't I think of doing it that way, Tony? Storyboard that gives me some really great tools to make my work look a bit nicer, a little nicer. So let's get started here. By the end of the class today, you may be able to make something that looks as nice as what we see on the screen right here. So we're gonna look at storyboards in a nutshell here, pun intended. We're gonna look at them as graphic organizers. We're gonna look at them as tools for telling stories, and we're gonna look at them as tools for making presentations. So we're gonna start with this activity today, which is telling a personal story, and I really like using this at the beginning of the school year, and I'm glad that you're all here at the beginning of the school year to do this. And I know some of you have already started, and some of you are starting next week. If you're in the Northeast, you're probably starting next week or later this week even. Some of my friends are starting on Friday of this week, tomorrow. That's kind of a rough start, but anyway. I like this story because what this does is it provides a fun and a safe and flexible environment to have our students tell their little stories to kind of get to know each other and for you to get to know them. So let's get started here. Let's sign into Storyboard that. Let me log into my account. Somehow I logged myself out just before we started. I don't know how or why I did that. I know how I did it. I'm not sure why I did it. All right. Well, let's go ahead, and I'm going to start by creating a storyboard. Much like the story you see on the screen here. I'm going to kind of show you how I made this story that you see on the screen. Now, there are many layouts that you can use for your storyboard. You can see in that bottom left corner, I clicked on Storyboard Layout, and you can see all the formats that I can use. But I think for a quick activity that you do in your classroom at the beginning of the school year to kind of get to know your students, using the 3-frame story is more than adequate. For that quick, here it is, let's get to know each other. Tell me a story about your summer vacation, or tell me a story about how you feel on the first day of school. So what I'm going to do here is let's set the scene. Okay. So I want to set this scene, my background scene, and I'm going to tell the story of my first day of school. Now, my first day of school when I was in junior high school. So this is my first day of school when I was starting junior high, 7th grade. Where I grew up, we did 7th through 9th grade in the junior high. So this is my story of my first day of junior high. You can see here we have a school setting. So I clicked on scenes and school, and we have a bunch of scenes that we can use as our background. And scroll through there. This is actually not all that different than what my school looked, than what the junior high kind of looked like in my town. Actually, that one's a little closer to it. There was a green courtyard and it was a brick building. This wasn't blacked out, but anyway, that's beside the point. I can change this scene a little bit. This is one of the things I love about Storyboard. That for that student who says, "I'm not an artist, I can't draw, I'm not creative." Well, let's edit the scene. Okay. Make it nighttime, daytime, clear, snow, rain. I'll make it clear. You notice I made the sky a little brighter there, or I can make it darker. Let's change the tone of the building. Again, going back in my memory bank of Arthur H. Illing Junior High School, it was more of that kind of gray cement color than it was anything else. So I can customize that a little bit. Let's do that. Okay. All right. So we're starting the scene here, my first day of junior high school. And I'm going to use this particular scene that I just customized all 3 times in this story. You can mix and match, but I'm going to use it all 3 times. Right? So let's just copy this one. Boom. Drag it over. Copy this one. Drag it over. Just copy and drag. Now, I want to put my characters into the story. Now, I was a 12-year-old, so I'll put myself in there. I was 12 when I started junior high. And I kind of looked like, well, this kid here. And I'll make it look a little bit like me. There's my dark hair. My blue eyes. And yeah, I probably wore clothes very similar to that. So that's me back in junior high. Now, I can edit the pose for every one of these characters, including changing my expression. That was probably about right for my face at that time. Or confused. Or scared. But I was probably more confused than anything else first day of 7th grade. Like most 7th graders. Now let's put in my let's put in my buddy Sean who went to junior high with me. We grew up going to elementary school together, and then that's Sean. And let's change his hair. He had kind of blondish hair, and we're still friends to this day. And he'll probably hate me for using this, but let's go and put that in there. All right, let's change the shirt. Okay, I differentiate between the two of us. All right, so that's our little scene, and just position our characters around here. And there are tons of kids in the background, but for now, I'm just going to put two in there. Let's go ahead and put our textables. All right, so our text. This will let me go in here and say something to the effect of, I'm going to drag that in, position it, and I'll say something like, hey Sean, do you have any clue where we're supposed to go? And Sean's reply to me, and this is pretty much true to life right now. I'm going to use this one here. Sean's response was pretty much, nope. Let's go listen to Nirvana. And that's actually pretty much my first day of school at Arthur H. Illing Junior High School back in 1990 or 91. 90. I can't remember. 90 or 91. Nirvana was huge then. So, now, the next part of our scene. I'm going to reuse my character. So, to reuse my character, I just hit the duplicate button and drag him over here. All right. That's me. All right. And I'm going to duplicate Sean. And again, this is pretty much true to life. Sean's almost disappeared from the scene now. All right. So again, put in my little character. Boom. Drag him in place. All right. No way. I'll get in trouble. And Sean will say something to me to the effect of, and when I share this with him on Facebook later tonight, I'm sure he'll repeat it in pretty much the same version. And he'll say something like, don't be a wimp. I'm sure he said something a little bit stronger than that. All right. And so what ends up happening is that I end up going into the school by myself on that first day, totally confused. Right. And I put in something to this effect. Well, here goes nothing. Now, with all this text, and what I haven't pointed out in this text, so you can change the text size, style. You can also go in and change your alignment and your positioning. And there are also accent characters. There's a virtual keyboard you can open up. So this is convenient if you're going to use this for students in a world language course. And you can have them, rather than trying to struggle with the keyboard combination to make accents, you can have them use this virtual keyboard. And you'll see there I also changed the color scheme for my speech bubble. Now, when I'm done with this little story, let's say I want to save this. All right, so I'm happy with this little story. Call it Richard's first day of junior high. Now, I'm inside my teacher account, so there is an option to make it as part of an assignment, but it's not an assignment. Let's save that storyboard. And now I've saved my storyboard. And I just saw a chat question pop in there. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Now, from here, I have a few options on publishing this story that I've just saved in my account. You can download your story as individual images. You can also print it. And you can print it as a storyboard, okay, as you see here. And it'll look much like that. Or you can print it with storyboard and text. And you can see the text as it appears right here. Okay, so this just has a little dialogue written down below. You also see there, I can print it out as one item per page, so one cell per page. What I like about doing it this way, so again, I'll print it out this way. Let's say I want to do 3 per page. I can choose this kind of layout where each cell in the story has space below for more writing, or space to the right-hand side for more writing. Why I like that is that my student can go in and write in some additional notes to share with me. We'll also look at this in a bit as a tool for note-taking in general, for concepts that our students may have mapped out or concepts that you've illustrated and you want students to take more notes on. So let's say I want to print it that way. And so this is how it'll appear, with space for my students to write. So that was our first little personal story. Storyboards can also be used for illustrating protocols and roles and processes. And you can do it in a variety of ways. And if you recall from a few minutes ago, before I did the personal story, when I opened up the storyboard templates, there were a variety of formats that I could use, including this one here, 6 ways of thinking. But you may also do something like this to illustrate problems and solutions. And this one used some wireframes that are available in Storyboard that. And we'll take a look at how I did that in just a second. And I also like this as a way to frame up a difficult conversation, or a way to frame up a potential dialogue or a potential debate that you might have in your classroom. For years, I did student-led conferences. So parent-teacher conferences were, in fact, led by the student or guided by the student. And part of that process included having students think about not only what they're going to say, but the potential responses from their parents and from me to what they were going to say, and how they would handle those responses. So these are all problems and processes that we can illustrate by using storyboards. So let's take a look at these options here. So again, I'm going to create a storyboard. And let's take a look at how I did this little problem here, the illustrating problems and solutions. So I went into web technology, and you can see we have all kinds of icons that are available. There's even emojis now, web icons, all kinds of things in here. Clouds, gestures. Yeah. But I used wireframes for this one here. You see, I just dragged that into place. Now, you might do this on a monitor, or you might do it using a tablet display or a phone style display. Let's do a phone style display. Not much difference between a phone and a tablet. You want to expand it, you can just click and drag and expand that little frame. Now, so there's a little bit of room to write, if you will. I'm going to change the color of that screen. The black screen may work, but not as well for me as the white screen will work. And customize your phone case if you want to as well. Right. Now, what I'm going to do is inside here, I'm going to reuse this one 3 times. So just duplicate it, drag it, and reuse it again. It occurs to me that phone might be upside down. So let's rotate again. All right. Now I think the phone's correct. There we go. So let's go in now and put our scene in place. So I use this text format, and we're again, you can use clouds, you can use all kinds of shapes, but I'm going to try to mimic my phone as much as possible. So I'm going to set up this scenario in which our students need to reply correctly, if you will. So I'm going to ask my students to make their own storyboard like this one, in which they set up this scenario of how to reply correctly to various types of text messages or push notifications. Right? Okay. So there's my first notification, my first little message. And let's put in our reply. Now, again, if you wanted to mimic this as closely as possible to a phone, you might change the color, make it different. Might just say okay. And let's do a little reply. And we'll say something like, okay. So I set up this little scenario here, and what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to ask my students to complete the scenario. Okay? So I'm going to save this as is. Say, complete the scenario. Now, one of the things I can do with this is I'm in a Storyboard That teacher account at the moment, which will allow me to create an assignment, right, for my students, and I can add this to an assignment if I want to. Uh, but I can also just give this out to my students as a printed copy. And if you recall from earlier, I may use this print layout to have my students complete some information about what should happen next here. What's the proper response? Is this okay? Um, how would you fill this out yourself? Now, the next item we're going to look at is using storyboards as an alternative to your traditional book report. Now, Storyboard That does offer a lot of free, and by free I mean completely free, lesson plan ideas that you can take advantage of. And by the way, I'm going to give you a copy of all these slides, and all these links up here will take you to different places so you can find various Storyboard That examples and lesson plans and lesson ideas. Also, if you just scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll find little quick start guides and things of that nature as well. Okay. But let's take a look at some of our guides here. Yeah, let's say you want to find one for middle school ELA. And you want to pick a short story. We have all kinds of lesson plans here. There's Huck Finn, right, The Giver, fairly popular. And you can see the complete lesson plan here. You can even create a copy of it yourself if you wanted to. So click Create a Copy. And this one here, you see the template that's set up for you and your students. We're doing some character analysis here. We have Jonas and traits, interests, beliefs, and quotes from the book. But you can also use this for nonfiction works as well, or for nonfiction concepts. You can see the demonstration I have on the screen here is for making a comparison of the North and the South leading up to the American Civil War. So let's make a storyboard in that manner. And again, if you have any questions about any of this as we're going through, feel free to jump in and ask a question in the chat panel. I'm going to change my storyboard layout here, and we're going to make a little storyboard about one of my favorite books, of all time, which is called Snow in the Kingdom. It's a book about climbing Mount Everest in the 1980s, written by a fellow Mainer named Ed Webster. And I'm going to create a little alternative book report about that book and how you can do it. What we're going to use here is, instead of using the pre-made images that you find in Storyboard That, we're actually going to include some real images instead of just using cartoon images. So I'm going to use that layout. Again, you can see I can also pick these other items. Right? Yeah, grid layout, great. T-chart and grid layout, great for those comparison pieces. By using the cell and description, and I can usually like search for Mount Everest. And now we have pictures of Mount Everest as opposed to using just some cartoon drawings. So I can use this as the scene. Now, if I want to crop down part of this, I certainly can. Crop out the image itself. Or I can just click and drag and make it full screen. Okay. So there's the beginning of my scene here. Let's edit my little description. Now I'm going to use a different image of Mount Everest than this one. Same mountain, slightly different image. And just because I used an image like this one doesn't mean I can't combine it with a character. So I can pick any number of these characters up here. I may even take a look and see if there's a mountain climber. I'm not really sure if there is or not. Doesn't appear to be. So I'll go back into my characters, and I'll find a character that I will modify to look the part, if you will. So you kind of look the part of my mountain climber. So let's pick one of these guys up here. Now, it doesn't really match up exactly to what I needed, but we'll work with it for now. Again, we can edit the pose. We can have him walking. We can also do some instant poses, as I mentioned before. We pick that walking, but we can customize it. We'll use that front view, side view. Let's use our side view of our mountain climber there. And we'll say something to the effect of the story features Ed Webster attempting to climb the mountain without oxygen. And we'll do our little book trailer, if you will, here, and let's put in in the end here. We'll use our search results for Mount Everest, and we'll put them in there at the end, and click and drag and make them a bit larger. Now I want to bring him to the front, so let's bring him to the front. There we go. He didn't quite make it, but he was close. Read the book to find out how close he got to the top. Now you'll notice all those images have been added to the bottom. There's been a Creative Commons license attribution added to the bottom of our story as you see it right now. Right now, I put in my little scene, and again, I use that cell and description format, but I could also just reuse it and make it into this new format. Okay. And then instead of saying definitions, I'll say summary. Main character. And then we'll add in the rest of our story that way. Okay. So you can always go in and modify what you've previously made in a different storyboard. That's a similar idea to the character recap, which is a more detailed version of what I just did, where our students are doing a scene from each chapter of a book, or doing something like this, where we put in a plot diagram, which is also kind of what I was beginning to do there with my book story about Mount Everest, where we're putting in beginning, middle, and end of the story. The title and caption layout is really useful in doing things like this. Literary terms or definitions of terms, so vocabulary board. One of the ideas I had just the other day about using storyboards for language lessons is the idea of making storyboards about various phrasal verbs. So, for example, and I don't have this example in the slide, so I'm going to do it right now on the fly. The phrasal verb of to take off. So I'm going to create a storyboard about the phrasal verb of to take off, or take off. We'll say take off. And let's change our scene. Okay? And let's say we want to use an airport. So didn't quite find the airport I was looking for. Maybe I'll do runway. There you go. There's our runway. Okay. And it'll stretch to fill it. Okay. And now let's put that airplane in it, that little airplane clip art that I just had a second ago. Let's put that in there. Let's rotate that plane. See if I can get him in the right position. Maybe not quite. Can't quite get it there. Let's do something like that. Okay. And I might do something like this. Okay. I might say that takeoff can refer to an airplane leaving the ground at an airport. And I might do something else here and say takeoff again. And just for fun, I'm going to change up the colors. And in this case, I'm going to say takeoff can mean a discount. So let's go in and see what kind of scenes we can find for a store. Or shopping. So I'll put in my little basket and we'll stretch to fill it out. Let's say something like this, like takeoff. Can refer to discounting the price of an item at a store. So a question just popped in regarding the iPad app or the using this on an iPad. So Storyboard that will work in on your iPad in your web browser. You can do all the functions that you're seeing me do here will work in the web browser on your iPad as well. Likewise, if you're an Android tablet user, it'll work just as well there. Only exception to that being the, and maybe Josh can clarify this. Josh, if you can chime in the chat, can you upload an image on the iPad app or on an iPad if you're using Storyboard that? Okay, great. Josh says yes, you can. All right, fantastic. And it works the same way. All right. So speaking of upload, if I wanted to upload something for one more part of my definition of takeoff, and I want to use a different color scheme on my font this time around. I'm going to upload an image here. Now, I have images that are stored on my computer, but I can also use something like Photos for Class, which you can find at photosforclass.com, to look for an image. And I'm going to say, I need a picture of a vacant room or an empty room. Okay. So I'm going to use that picture that I just downloaded. One of the nice things about Photos for Class is that the images that you download will automatically have attribution information added to the bottom of them. I'm going to drag that picture in. And so that's the picture I want to use. And I'm going to fill it in. There it is. Let's say my definition of takeoff this time that takeoff can mean to quickly leave a social gathering. So just another way to think about using storyboards and using some of these templates that are available inside of Storyboard that. I'm going to save this one. So I rather like this one. and let's save it. All right. All right, so let's wrap up here. There's just a couple of quick things I want to point out here. In terms of templates that you may take advantage of, there is a timeline template that you can use inside of Storyboard that you can see I used it to make a little timeline of the story of me and two of my dogs. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you can also use this as a tool for taking notes or visual aids for taking notes. This is something I actually did with a group of my own students who were in special education, and we were looking at basically making a glossary with visuals included in them. As I mentioned, there are some great guides to teaching with storyboards and many lesson plans. A couple hundred lesson plans now available for free on Storyboard that. Thank you. So you can find those there. Again, I'm going to share all these slides with you in just a moment. You'll have a copy of them to take with you. If you stay to the very end, I'll give you a copy of them. If you're looking for tools for assessment, Storyboard that also makes a product called Quick Rubric. Quick Rubric is a completely free website. Just go to Quick Rubric, click create, and you can start making a rubric to print, download, print, share with your friends. Just a handy little tool for making a rubric. We talked about photos for class. And as always, Aaron, the founder of Storyboard that offers a discount on the premium upgrade for Storyboard that. If you have stayed for the whole webinar, you can take advantage of that discount by using that code that you see on the screen there. All right. So as I promised, I'm going to share these slides with you right now. So if you're here in the session and and you take a look at the chat, I've just dropped in a link to the slides for today's session. All those slides have active links in them. Click on any of the links and you'll be directed to more information about the items you see on the slides themselves. So as always, thanks for joining us for the last hour. Yep. And if you're seeing that link, you've got it. Yep. You've got those slides. This will also be sent out to you in a follow-up email. You'll be receiving a follow-up email that has these slides, a copy of the recording, as well as some additional information about Storyboard that and using storyboards in general. So thanks everyone for joining me for the last hour. I hope you have a great new school year. As always, if you have any questions about storyboards, Storyboard that, or anything else having to do with educational technology, feel free to send me an email at richardbyrne@freetech4teachers.com, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. I love getting questions from all of you. So thanks everyone. Have a great evening.